Welcome to Research Renaissance, presented by the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. Embark on a journey into the forefront of cutting-edge brain science as we feature insightful discussions with a diverse array of guests, from early career researchers pioneering groundbreaking science to influential voices in investment communities, policymaking, and research institutions. Together, we delve into neurological diseases, their causes, treatments, and the quest for cures. Join us in advancing our understanding of the brain and addressing its ailments. Welcome to Research Renaissance. I'm Deborah Westphal, your host and guide through the fascinating future of the brain. Joining me today is Ana Maiques, the CEO and co-founder of Neuroelectrics, a company that develops non-invasive brain stimulation devices to treat neurological disorders. We will be discussing innovation, entrepreneurship, and crossing the chasm between science and commercial solutions. So welcome, Ana. It's a real pleasure to be speaking with you today. You're an incredible woman that has done some amazing things. And I just kind of want to go through a few awards that you have received over the last few years. In 2010, you were nominated as one of the most influential entrepreneurs under 40 in Spain by the Institute of Higher Business Studies. And then again in 2014, you received an EU prize for women innovators. But you've also been listed in 2015 and 2016, most inspiring 50 women in Europe. And then in 2018, you received a Tamir Foundation Fellowship, which recognizes leader in biotech and life sciences. And then just recently, in 2022, you've received the most exceptional entrepreneurship award by Goldman Sachs. So tell us, how did this journey start, and especially this entrepreneurial spirit, and how far does it go back, and what really influenced you?
Yeah, I think that first of all, thanks, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the first thing is that just looking back at those awards, I think that they are super important to visualize the role, I think, of women CEOs and diversity, in the tech or medtech space, right? So I just encourage women and diversity in general to really go for these awards, because every time we win one of these awards, we kind of get out of the closet in the sense of showing that there are non-typical CEOs, or that, CEOs and of founding companies can be of all colors and genders and geographies, right? So I'm very proud for all of those awards, for what it represents to other generations coming behind me in a way, but also to my team, of course, because every time that you have external validation on the work you're doing, it's also like win on your, on your sales for the whole team, right? It's like from the outside, somebody saying, good job, keep on rowing. And my entrepreneurial spirit, I often say that when I graduated from college, I only knew I liked math and I wanted to have an impact on the world. And it was kind of by chance that I joined our first company, Starlab. And I married a scientist, I married a physicist and a mathematician. So I got exposed to science in a way at home. But then we both together joined this company. And one day, the company that we joined went bankrupt. And it was like the Matrix moment, in the sense that we were employees, we loved this project. It was about linking science and market, right? It was like a MIT in Europe kind of. It says in Startup, 100 years means nothing if you put the best scientists of different disciplines in the world with business people, you'll get, the inventions of the future, right? And we joined this company, we loved it, but it went bankrupt and we were employees. So we were given the red pill or the blue pill, right? The red pill was like, you're employees, you get your severance and you go home and look for another job. But at this point, we loved the company. We were like so happy. We really believed. So we did what it's called a management buyout, which means becoming entrepreneurs, in the sense of, I often say it was at that moment when in your life you have two paths and one is more risky than the other. And we chose the risky one. So I think that's how we became entrepreneurs. So I wasn't born an entrepreneur. I never thought about creating my company, but we had a moment in life where we decided to take the red pill and take risk, and therefore became entrepreneurs by a choice in life.
So where was the passion in the product or the company that went bankrupt? What was it about it that, drove you to take that risk?
Well, it was a castle in Brussels. Imagine like a kind of Tintin kind of castle, right? And in there were 100 scientists from all disciplines. One was doing artificial intelligence, genetics, the architecture of the future, education of the future. And they were coming from all over the world. And it was such a beautiful idea to get all these scientists paid well by a private fund. And then I joined the business team, and Julio, my husband, joined the science team, right? And it's just to have the privilege of work with all these brilliant people thinking, 50 years ahead or 100 years ahead and developing this science and technology was very inspiring. So we thought, wow, this is a really great idea. And we had developed a space unit and a neuroscience unit back in those times. And this company decided that it didn't want to grow inside, to just preserve the serendipity of the place. So 100 was kind of the top of their number. So they chose Barcelona as a second unit, where we were leading the Barcelona kind of lab. And we got the most beautiful place in Barcelona, which is a beginning of the century astronomical observatory on the top of the mountain with Barcelona at our feet. Like, I often joke with my American friends, like, yeah, you start businesses in your garage, but what about starting in a 19th century astronomical observatory? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So that's how we decided that the place was beautiful. The areas of work were beautiful. The idea of the business model was beautiful. So that drove us to, not want to throw all that, we were working in the observatory. We had contracts with the European Space. There was a lot that we had built. So we didn't want to throw it away.
So does the company, tell me a little bit about the company then today and, neuroelectronics, and do you have that diversity of kind of technologies and problems that you're trying to solve, or have you gotten more focused on this neurological kind of area of study?
Well, if I summarize, let's say 10 years in, 10 seconds, what happened is that we started working on space and neuroscience. And the business model was that out of this research, spin-off companies will be created and they will generate profit to feel like the mother company, in research. And we bet very hard on the two areas, on space, Earth observation to protect the planet, and on neuroscience. To make the story short, we had amazing technologies in the Earth observation to protect the planet, but bottom line, nobody wanted to pay. There was no business to spin off because nobody wanted to pay. So in 2011, we spin out Neuroelectrics from this mother company as the original concept. And we saw that, Neuroelectrics was, skyrocketing, and the space, opportunity didn't find a good business model. So at the end, we shut down the space area and we entirely focus on Neuroelectrics.
And so now you have this company that's very focused on, solving some of these diseases. I see that one of your primary products is this kind of this electronic cap to really help with Alzheimer's and dementia. Can you talk about that? And what is that? And what does it do?
So, in a nutshell, our brain is not only made of molecules and neurons biologically, right? It's also a vast electrical system, as it's your heart as well. It generates electrical signals. It connects through electrical synapses as well, right? So it's very interesting that a lot of the focus of the last 34 years has been focused on drugs, right? But there is another way to hack the brain. and it's through the electrical circuitry. So one of the key questions for the audience that is researchers is, does biology drive physics in the brain, or is the physics, right, the electrical system that drives biology? At any rate, we as a company believe that interfering with the electrical system of the brain can help many patients suffering. Because a lot of the patients we are trying to help are not responding to drugs. They are refractory to medication. So why don't we try from another perspective? And you know what is really beautiful for the audience is that the Egyptians and the Romans, there are graphical evidence of them getting electric fish from the river and putting them over their heads to deal with pain. It's just amazing. I mean, they
That's
also
amazing. I didn't know that.
that there was, a way to interfere with the brain from an electric perspective. So sometimes I kind of feel I'm not that innovative because, Romans and Egyptians eventually figure it out.
Using fish, which is just really amazing.
Yeah, electric fish like eel, this kind of like fish. So there is like Egyptian hieroglyphies that they have a fish on their head.
That's funny. That's funny. That's really interesting. So when you use this electric signals in people's brain, is it very personalized, or is there kind of a standard operation, if you would, across each one of the individuals? Do our brains give out different signals? Do different signals, affect individuals in different ways? How does that work?
So we truly believe that every brain is different. We truly believe that every pathology is different. We don't really yet understand how the brain works. There is almost 100 billion neurons that are communicating, all the time and changing dynamically, right? So everything that you're affecting in the brain has a network effect, right? And it's hard for us to really understand how this is affecting, the diseases. So I would say that we are in an early stage of personalization. But for example, from Neuroelectrics, we have developed, since years, we've been using, machine learning language models, AI now so fashionable, because there's no way we can understand the brain without, the help of these tools, right? It's just too much for us. So what we have developed that we are very proud of is NeuroTwin, which is what we call a digital copy of your brain, right? A digital twin of your brain. So we build in the cloud or in the computer computational neuroscience model of the brain of the patient. And that takes into account the biophysics of the patient, meaning with an MRI, how thick is your brain, your conductivity, and your brain, Deborah, may have a scalp thickness and a conductivity different from mine. It's structured physically in a different way, right? And the other part that we bring into the computational models is the electrophysiology of your brain. So maybe your brain, in an electrical way, generates the alpha waves at 7 hertz and your husband at 8 hertz, right? So how does your brain perform electrically? So when you put these two things together and you make your digital twin, we can start to play in the computer with our electrodes and with our stimulation to understand how electrical stimulation will affect your brain per pathology. So usually we ask the neurologist or the psychiatrist for a brain target in the brain. Like, okay, what is the area that you want to excite or inhibit? And then we use the computational model to personalize in what positions we should locate the electrodes and what kind of current do we need to apply. Is it direct current? Is it alternate current? Is it excitatory? Is it inhibitory? Is it a custom waveform, right? And for example, for the patients that suffer from epilepsy, you want inhibitory currents because you know that area of the brain is hyperexcited. But for Alzheimer's, you want excitation because you know or you want to stimulate at a specific gamma frequency, for example. So there are a lot of degrees in which you can stimulate electrically the brain. And that's how I think that personalization is truly needed.
So how long are the effects? So if you stimulate the brain, do you need to have kind of consistent stimulation or inhibitor to kind of address the disease, or is this something that is once a month? Do you know what is the kind of the procedure there?
So, based on the data that we have gathered, for example, let me tell you about epilepsy. We are running a phase 3 registration clinical study towards FDA approval. In that study that we made the pilot in Boston Children's, what we are doing is our patients are monitoring their seizures during 8 weeks, right? That's kind of like the seizure frequency, right? Like I have 80 seizures per week. So during 8 weeks, they track their seizures. Then we stimulate them 10 days, 20 minutes every day with our device. And then we follow them up for 8 weeks and compare baseline with follow-up. In our pilot study in Boston Children's, we were able to reduce seizures 44%, which is pretty remarkable given that this is a non-invasive approach. So because these patients don't respond to medication and the only alternative they have is surgery. So we come in the middle, right? Before you get surgery, or if you cannot get surgery, then we come as a non-invasive approach. And then the idea is that after these 8 weeks, the patient at home, hopefully, they will do another 10 days. And that will last them 8 weeks more. So our electrical stimulation, since it's very low voltage, you need repetition. In depression, for example, or in Alzheimer's, the protocols are more intense. They are more like 20, 30 minutes every day during a month, for example. But then you do it at home directly. So it's just about sitting down on your couch, putting the device on, and getting 30 minutes every day during 30 days, for example. And we know that at least that will take you 30 days. For example, in depression, we also have an FDA trial. And we know that 30 days of stimulation in depression will last you 4 weeks. So after that, so it will be like every other month, you need to get your stimulation at home.
And this is not reversing the disease or curing the disease. It is helping with the kind of the symptoms or slowing the disease. Is that correct?
Well, that's what we know so far. But we know that so far because the technology is very new and we haven't tested it long enough. Our thesis is that the more stimulation, for example, in epilepsy, we think that if patients are 1 year in this regime of 10 sessions, 8 weeks, 10 sessions, we think our efficacy in terms of seizure reduction will increase, maybe from 44 to 60 to 70, right? Because of the repetition. The brain has what we call plasticity. So every time you stimulate the brain, you're telling neurons kind of to fire in a certain way, and the brain kind of learns that behavior, right? So we think that the effects will enhance through more stimulation. What we don't know is after 1 or 2 years of stimulation, if we will be able, with the plasticity of the brain, to reverse part of the disease. I think it's an open question. For the moment, we know we can improve the symptoms, but down the line, we don't know. We will see with the data.
Do you have any idea or hypothesis on starting treatments like this early before the disease maybe even manifests, like in a very proactive way, where people maybe in their 20s, 30s start doing this to try to prevent Alzheimer's or any of the dementias? Is there any thoughts there?
Yeah, so very good question, Deborah. So we have also a clinical trial ongoing in Alzheimer's, which we will have a readout in May of the pilot. Our thesis in Alzheimer's is not go to the most severe cases, but to go to the early stages of Alzheimer's. To your point, I mean, once, the brain is very damaged or once the amyloid plaques are very developed, maybe, I think we have a better chance in the early stages, more in mild cognitive decline, more like early stages of Alzheimer's. So I think that we can help those patients in the early stages. And I think that if we demonstrate with Alzheimer's that we can help the patients then down the line, when we see what happens after 1 year or so, maybe we can start to work on prevention. To your point, I mean, maybe you could prescribe that anybody that becomes 50, together with the AARP kind of membership, they also get, preventive electrical stimulation at home. That would be awesome, right? But I think that our point of view from a company perspective is to start in a disease under the FDA, gather enough evidence on what are they like 1 year effects or, medium to long term effects of the technology, and then bring into the prevention stage.
Can you talk a little bit about the FDA process, the approval process, and what you've been going through, and what are you learning? And then, as part of that, you mentioned that these caps would be for home use. What are the challenges as you think about that product? Because I would imagine it's different than being in a clinic to actually sending somebody home with this cap and having them kind of give that to themselves during the month.
So the FDA, I have to say that the FDA has treated us really well. So we started our clinical trial like in 2020. I've been several times to the FDA. And our division, the neurological devices division of the FDA, has been awesome. I mean, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs get very scared about the FDA, and I think it's much better to reach out to them, to meet them. I mean, they are normal people. They have name and last name. And once you meet them, it's no longer about the FDA. Back at the days, it was about Carlos Peña and Timothy Marjanin. And they're clear about what they want, right? So I think that the only hard thing about, the frustration as an entrepreneur is that we started this trial in 2021, at the end of 2020, and we are going to see the readout in Q1 26. So it's just a hard, slow process, but I think it goes on the benefit of, safeguarding patients and looking after their health, right? So it's frustrating because I have people writing to me every day, when are you going to be in the market? My son is suffering from epilepsy, my daughter. Or people participating in our study that they want to use the device. And it's like, you have to wait. You have to wait. So that's frustrating. But on the other hand, I understand why, right? The FDA has a lot of responsibility to oversee the use of these novel therapies.
Yeah, and the medical device, the way I understand it, is the medical device area and the FDA is still fairly new because the technology is moving very quickly, and so that caution, around new medical devices, which this is probably categorized as a medical device. Is that correct?
It is. But for example, we are kind of lucky because we are non-invasive, right? So there is no toxicity. There is not like we don't get into the body, right? But I've seen since I started the eruption of Elon Musk with Neuralink. I think it's been great on one side because it just put the flashlight into the field, right? And now there are much more investment coming in. It make it kind of like more mainstream. So I think it has been really good. But on the other hand, it has raised a lot of ethical questions. It has raised the bar at the FDA. There's concern because, the more mainstream that it becomes, the more risky, the more, So I think that we are, that's the game of developing new technologies, right? There is also an upside, but there is also a harder bar the more you get closer to the market.
Yeah. So what are the challenges to think about this and productize it for kind of over the shelf, if you will, or over the counter usage? Is the design of the device different if you're going to send it home with patients versus using it in a clinic?
Well, so in depression, when we reach out to the FDA to ask them whether we could send devices home, because it was like after pandemic, people were not leaving the houses and the FDA say yes. We did a pilot in depression with 35 patients. They were living between Kansas, Florida, and a couple of other states. And we sent them devices home, and there was no nurse, no physician, no technician. It was only the patient with their caregiver, whether their spouses, their children, whatever. And they had to do stimulation 30 days, 30 minutes every day at their homes without supervision, and then 7 sessions over the next month, so twice per week, let's say. Well, you'll be surprised. We got 88% compliance. I was shocked, which calls out that, you know, it's possible, it's doable, it happens, the patients like it. And the device wasn't even super designed to go home. It was the same device that for clinic. So what we are going to do when we do the pivotal in depression is optimize the device to, maybe disposable electrodes, just make it easier for the patients, but it worked out pretty good with our non-optimized device. So we are confident that we are ready for home use.
What kind of other technologies or products are you working across the company? Is this the kind of the primary focus, or are there emerging areas that you're looking at?
Well, I mean, non-invasive brain stimulation, or TES or TDCS, as it's called, is our main focus for the development of products in the therapeutic side, right? But remember, our product, on top of stimulating the brain, it can also monitor the brain. So the other area that we are further developing is using our platform and our product for diagnostics, right? So I think that there is a lot to do there. I mean, on one side, for clinics around the United States, where you can have a quick, portable way of doing EEG diagnostics. So if the technician is not there, can the emergency room, the ICU, right, perform a fast EEG, right, to see if a non-conscious patient has epilepsy or a severe brain damage. So that's one area. The other is that we've been pretty successful in partnering with pharma companies that are using our EEG or diagnostic device in clinical development. I think that's super interesting because we can link your neurophysiology in the brain to different drugs. So I would love for pharma companies to have the capacity to do a brain scanner with our EEG, and then if that could give them information of this molecule or this drug is better for this patient, like a matchmaking, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting that you came into this entrepreneurship, through a decision that you made because of the love of this company that you and your husband were working with, or for. What advice do you give to young entrepreneurs who are just kind of starting out on their journey? It's a pretty hard slug, and there's a lot of challenges. What advice do you give them?
Well, I think the entrepreneurial world has this kind of mystic, heroic kind of, you win it all kind of perspective, whilst I don't think it's the reality of an entrepreneur. I think the most important question for the ones that want to be entrepreneurs is why. I mean, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Because if it's to make money, it's the wrong answer. I don't think that's the motivation. And I'll tell you why. I mean, when I became an entrepreneur was year 2000. Now we're in 2025. I'm very proud of my company. I think we are going to have a good readout next year. So hopefully in 26, we will have accomplished a lot of the things we wanted to do. But in a nutshell, Neuroelectrics was born in 2011. So it's 15 years of hard work every single day to execute your vision. So if your motivation is money, you're not going to make it. Your motivation has to be deeper, and it has to be aligned with your values. Like, I want to bring something new to the world. It's like, if you will, I define it as a call from God. Like, you think, I have in my hands this vision, this technology. If I don't bring it to the world and have an impact, who will do it? And I want to see that impact. It's like, what do you do with your talent, right? And I think that is the right motivation, because for my co-founder and me, every morning we wake up with the same motivation. This has to get to patients. We have to have an impact. We have been working 15 years to see patients improving, right? And that takes you so long. That takes you through all the obstacles, through the ups and downs. It's like a roller coaster. is not a fun life, let me tell you. I mean, we only talk about the ups, but there's so many downs. And in those downs, if your motivation is aligned to your values, I think you will endure. So I think it's like a marathon, it's not a sprint. And when the audience listens to the success stories, nobody tells about how many years, how many downs, how many previous companies that guy failed, how many bankruptcies he went through, right? How much he worked hard, super hard, how little of a life he had, right? So I'm just saying that I don't think it's for everyone, but if your motivation is aligned and you really want to do it, you should give it a chance. Because everything big started small. Every innovation didn't exist before somebody was stubborn enough to take it to the market, right? So it's beautiful as a journey, but you have to be ready for it because it's never easy and it's never quick.
Do you have any recommendations for women leaders or women that aspire to be leaders in biotech?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there is a story I always tell, and it's like when I went to live in Boston, in 2016, when I arrived in Boston, I started to raise money for my company in 2019, 20. And I remember that it was so hard. I got so many no's. I got so many closing doors. So I went for lunch with a friend of mine from Boston who was a venture capitalist and who was a woman. And I said, listen, friend, why am I not raising any money and why is it so hard? And you know what she told me in 2020? It's very easy. You have to put a man to raise money for you.
Oh, interesting.
Which I deeply breathed and kind of reflected. And I said, well, she knows her world, but wait a minute. I have 2 sons and I have 2 daughters. And I was thinking on my daughters and all the women that may want to, go to Boston and raise money. And I said, this is kind of the piece of advice that you shouldn't take. I mean, a lot of people give you advice, and there's some advice that you should say, and some advice say, no. So I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to do this myself. And if I don't raise money, I don't raise money. It's okay. And what I did is what in the US, they call the extra mile. So I think I worked a little bit harder, persevere a little bit more, going like the extra mile, and I nailed $20 million from 2 of the best investors in Boston, Morningside and the Henry Termeer Trust. So, to women out there is that don't let anybody tell you cannot do this, because you cannot do it until you do it. And it's, if you don't like what you see, you just change it. Just go the extra mile and create a new reality for you and for the ones, coming behind. So that is my advice to the women out there. And not only to the women, I think that people from minority countries, different sexuality, different color. I mean, there are a lot of degrees in which the odds are kind of against you. You know that only 2% of all the capital invested in companies goes to women-led organizations, 2%. And we are 50% of the population.
Yeah, why is that? Do we know? I mean, is it just historic? Or is there something else that is kind of happening with how women present the problem and the ask?
I don't think it's the problem or the ask. I really think that we came kind of later in the game, right? And that a lot of the finance structures in the world are run by men, white men. And I don't think they're bad people. I just think that there is a bias to invest in people like you, right? So to that, I also think that there should be more diversity in the investment community, more women-led funds or Black people-led funds or gay people-led funds or, I don't know, minority countries. It's like there should be more diversity on the money world as well. I think that's because, at the end, the society is diverse, so the power structure should be diverse, especially on finance.
Is the finance world changing? And how do you see Do you see changes? Is it getting easier to fundraise? And it may be, you're just better at it now than you were 15 years ago. But how do you see that world changing?
Yeah, I think that's why I really think I encourage women to succeed, because the more rounds women raise, the more successful, it's just we came later in the game, right? So we just have to leave a trace of success, right? So every time a women-led organization hits the stock exchange, every time you raise money, every time it's just more and more references. So I think that we just have to build, our track record and then visualize it, raise awareness. Like, we should see more references of women succeeding so that we can inspire, younger girls. It cannot be that every time you think of an entrepreneur is Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. It cannot be. I mean, there should be more. I mean, there are so many successful people in the world. And why we only have like two very similar, right? Silicon Valley. No, I mean, let's open that up too.
Yeah. So let's kind of turn to technology. Technology is it seems to be moving very, very fast. We have the chatter out there around AI and machine learning and robotics. What do you see the technology landscape and how are you kind of keeping up with that and incorporating that in your company for the future?
Like the technology in general.
Yeah, just the technology. How are you, as a business leader, how are you thinking about some of this technology and just the changes? I mean, you talked about some of the technology you're using for diagnosis and then also with your product, but technology is changing very, very quickly and it's allowing us to learn more about the world around us or our bodies. How are you thinking about technology and where do you think it's going to go in the next 5 years?
Well, I mean, I think that I was at the AI summit in France with President Macron a couple of weeks ago. And a lot of the US and European and even Indian leaders came. And I think there is a concern about AI because I think it's the fastest kind of growing technology and most rapidly adopted that we have seen, right, in the history of technology, right? And I don't know, I would love for especially AI to be better controlled than social media. I think I think that at the end, social media kind of controlled us, and I wouldn't like for AI to happen the same, right? So, I participate a lot of like neuroethics debates, no? And there is even people thinking that, for example, in Colombia, Rafa Yuste, with the Neuro Rights Foundation, that even the right to protect your brain data should be in the Constitutional Bill of Rights, right? It's like what does makes us human is our brain. So, the moment we start implanting chips in the brain and getting brain data, I think, it's not the same thing to have technologies for your knees or, that for your brain. Your brain is what defines you. So, protection on your agency and on your identity and the commercialization of your brain data, I think that should be a red bar that we haven't had to face until now, but I think it's really important. So, I am participating in a lot of kind of AI for good ethics debate because as a leader in the field, I'm worried about, I don't want neurotech or the technologies that we are developing for good, right, to be doing any harm or being in the hands of people that are not ethical, right? So it's a big question also for the audience that is listening, right? If you're a 20-year-old person, will you consent anything once you have a chip on your brain or once on your brain data? Will you say consent, consent, consent and allow anybody to tap into your brain? Or, just for the sake of technology? Or will you, put a different view on that? And I'm worried about that because in social media, I didn't see the population responding or protecting themselves, right? And the governments didn't interfere either. So I think that with brain data and especially with AI, I hope we make AI work for us and not the humans be the object of the AI to get money from us or, consumerize us or anything. I mean, not all technology is good. I don't like the way social media was deployed in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned neuroethics. How is it that you're aware and you're participating in the dialogue. Is there something that's more active in how you're thinking about your products or the technologies that you're developing to kind of incorporate and ask those questions?
Well, I think that's a good, because, as I mentioned in the beginning, right, I knew when I was 18 years old that I liked math, let's say science, and that I wanted to have a positive impact in the world, right? So the company has allowed me to fulfill those kind of inner, wishes. But so I thought I was doing good just for the fact that me and my team are going after patients' health, improving, brains that are damaged, epilepsy, depression, Alzheimer's. But until I didn't meet neuroethicists, I didn't ask myself certain questions. Like, and the FDA, for example, didn't ask me in the informed consent for all my 150 patients in my clinical trial if my device was affecting their identity or agency. That's not part of a clinical trial. So I was exposed, right, to questions that have really helped me to look beyond only strictly what is my medical device, right? What about equity? I mean, is this device going to be used? Let's imagine that you can make people down the line, you can improve cognition, right? We are starting with Alzheimer's, but then if we go to prevention, right? Cognition. So equity. Who is going to have access to the technology? Is it for the smarter to get smarter, or for the richer to get richer? Or is it to really level up people? Thinking in a kind of non-medical, right? So I think that there are a lot of questions that when you speak with neuroethicists, which are usually academics, help you to change your perspective. What is your responsibility as a business leader to make sure that in the design of your technology, you can embed some firewalls to prevent some of those things from happening?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an emerging area that is so important, to kind of think about before technology is developed or products are pushed out there. So as we kind of wrap up here, I'm really interested. You talked about just the years that are behind you in creating the company and how long it takes to get the product out. When you think about 10, 15 years from now, what do you hope for, either for your company or your products or just for this kind of area of study? What is it that you really hope, you hope for?
Well, for Neuroelectrics and my team, we've really been working all together so hard to make sure. I would love to see our brain stimulation technology in every home, right? For patients suffering from epilepsy, depression, and Alzheimer's. That would be awesome. So that we kind of mainstream for neurologists and psychiatrists that instead of prescribing drugs, they can also prescribe brain stimulation at home, right? And that becomes kind of a new paradigm to treat brain diseases. And I hope that millions of patients all over the world will benefit from this idea that we have at the top of the astronomical observatory in Barcelona, right? And that it will really reach America and Europe and Asia, and all these patients will benefit. That's kind of like what we would hope, and I think it's going to be much nearer than 10 years. We expect FDA approval 27, so we should be in the market end of 27 or 28. So that's our dream.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, as people are listening and they want to know more about you, they want to know more about your company. What's the best way to kind of reach out if they're curious and they want to talk with you or your scientist?
Well, we are very active in social media, in LinkedIn, in Twitter. I have a phenomenal marketing team. But they can always reach me via email. It's my last name, at neuroelectrics.com. So it's very easy. So I always look at all my emails. I'm not good in LinkedIn because I get a lot of selling things connections. But if they drop me an email with any question, I'll make sure I answer and send it to the right person in my team.
Ana, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I know you're really, really busy. You split your time between the United States and Europe, and you're always on the go. And so I really appreciate your time and your real insight and your energy and your passion, because these diseases are horrible, and so having the ability to maybe treat these things non-invasively and without drugs is just amazing. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and let me tell you, for example, I was in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and I met a lady who is also linked to the wonderful Henry Termeer Foundation, which is, I love the foundation. So we gathered in an event, and she's a banker, and she told me, Ana, I'm so happy you are working in this technology, because my brother, who was a brilliant guy, he went to college, he was epileptic, and he should take his medication. But in college, he didn't want to take his medication because he wanted to play piano. And taking his medication didn't allow him the side effects to play piano. So he didn't take his medication to play piano, and he died from one day to the other from a seizure. And she explained that with such sorrow that I say, oh, I'm so sorry. So this happened recently, and this happened 18 years ago. Just to tell you, the impact of these diseases, people are not even aware, right? This lady was talking like it was yesterday, and it happened 18 years ago.
Yeah, and he wasn't able to do what he loved, which is the piano, and it should we should be able to live the life that we want to live without these diseases disrupting us so much. So thank you so much.
Thank you to you, Deborah. It has been a pleasure. I hope I have the opportunity to show your audience in real life the cap and the brain, because it's really a great experience. So I hope we can do something in person one day.
Yeah, I hope for that too, because it is amazing. You're out there on the web, and it is really amazing. So thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
Thank you for joining Research Renaissance. For more information and to stay updated, subscribe for more episodes, and visit our website at tofflertrust.org. Feel free to call us if you have any thoughts, suggestions, or just want to find out more about the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. Until we meet again, onward and upward.